Hello and welcome to another Doctor Who Big Finish related video. In today's Doctor Who Big Finish related video, I'll be looking at this, the 8th Doctor Time War Volume 2. Yes, it's time for round 2 for the 8th Doctor in the Time War. Yes, one of Big Finish's monumental releases, one of the big releases for 2018 because it's the 8th Doctor and the Time War. Two big things, so hopefully this will be a good box set, because the last box set of Volume 1 of this, I wasn't really a fan of. The ideas were there, but it just didn't really gel together, so I was hoping that Volume 2 would be an improvement. So we'll see in this review whether Volume 2 is better than Volume 1. So without further ado, let's look at the presentation. So taking a look at the box art, we have the new Jodie Whittaker logo there with the diamond motif there, a Dalek, we have General Tamasan, Bliss, the 8th Doctor, we have the 12, an Ogron, a Dalek submarine, a planet, and a Dalek there as well, and a Dalek submarine, and some 3.75-inch Daleks there. 8th Doctor Time War 2. And the side of the box, as you can see, we have the logo stacked now, which is quite interesting, because obviously if they try to do the logo as it is, then it wouldn't quite fit on that small space. And then we've got a picture of the 8th Doctor again and what the box set is, and the back of the box telling you a general synopsis for the series. So do feel free to pause if you want to know more about the series and what the set includes, with Lords of Terra, Planet of the Ogrons, In the Garden of Death, and Jonah. Then the other side of the box showing you the CDs within this set, and we have a picture of the 8th Doctor from Dark Eyes, not the Night of the Doctor McGann, so that's very interesting. So let's go on to the CDs themselves. So taking a look at the cover art for the Lords of Terror, we've got the crystal motif there, the Doctor Who logo, a Dalek, Bliss, General Tamasan the Doctor, a Dalek in this nice sort of bleak background, this very metallic industrial background, which is very nice. The back of the CD there with the cover image there and the box art there and what the story is about, so do feel free to pause to know more about this story, and the running time being 1 hour. Taking a look at the leaflet now, we have a lovely cast photo of the people involved, and we have writer's notes by Jonathan Morris there, and on the back we have the cast list for this series and the disc art for this story as well. Moving on to the second story, Planet of the Ogrons, again we have the Doctor Who logo there with the crystal motif, we have the 12, the Dalek Overseer, and we have the Ogron Doctor there, and we have this nice sort of explosive background there, Planet of the Ogrons by Guy Adams. Again the same general design, the cover there and the box art there and what the story is about, so do feel free to pause to know more about this story, with the running time being 1 hour. Look at the leaflet now, we have a lovely bit of writer's notes by Guy Adams there, and we have a lovely photo of John Coleshaw and Raki Thakra, and then we have the image of the cover again there, much like the disc art, and then we have the disc art for Planet of the Ogrons. In the Garden of Death, so again we have the Doctor Who logo there with some green crystals, we've got Bliss being transmatted, the 8th Doctor looking rather battered, we have the 12 in this sort of jungle background, well, this jungle prison background in the Garden of Death by Guy Adams. Now, so if we just move to the synopsis there, so do feel free to pause if you want to know more about the story, and the running time being 1 hour. Taking a look at the leaflet now, we have a lovely photo of Julie Mackenzie and Raki Thakra, and again we have the writer's notes by Guy Adams there, and again we have a picture of the cover there, much like the disc art for this release. Now on to the final story, Jonah, which is probably my favourite cover of the release. So we've got General Tamasan there, Bliss, the 12, some Daleks there, we have some Dalek submarines, the Doctor, Dalek, and again we have the Doctor Who logo there with the crystal motif there. And again, if you want to know more about the story, do feel free to pause, and the running time being 1 hour. So taking a look at the leaflet now, we have writer's notes there and a picture of the cast members who feature within this story, and we have production credits. There we have the disc art for Jonah and the behind the scene disc there. So what do I think of Lords of Terror? So is this a cracking start to the box set? Well, it's decent for the most part. The first 20 minutes are really solid, and I thought, yep, the Time War series has picked up. It just flew by. I found myself really engrossed with the world what Jonathan Morris has created, with it being very much like 1984, this bleak world. And I was thinking this story could be a 9 out of 10, but once we hit the 20-minute mark, the story really started to fall apart for me and become rather predictable with the twist the story had. And it very much feels like a story you've heard before. It's one of those stories. Even though the twist in the middle was very good, it just still somehow feels rather dull and just seems rather basic, considering this is by Jonathan Morris, one of Big Finish's best writers. It just seems rather dull, to be honest. So the basic story is Bliss is going home, and the Doctor is unsure how he'll be able to convince her mom and grandfather that she managed to survive the atrocities what happened during the starship of Theseus. And of course, this being in the Time War, everything is not the same, so you would think that this would be a great character piece for Bliss, and it sort of is. And I will give Jonathan Morris credit for trying to put the time aspect in there and making it a little bit more interesting. We have some nice callbacks to Genesis for Daleks, so some repercussion from that. We have some nice dilemmas, you know, who is right and who is wrong. because we're used to seeing the Time Lords being the good guys in the universe and the Daleks being the villains. However, it doesn't take much for the roles to be reversed, with the Daleks being the force for good and the Time Lords being the bad guys. The final 10 minutes are full of exterminations, as the Daleks really don't come into the story until the really late, well, until the final 10 minutes. That's when the Daleks really come into this story, and they certainly make an entrance. Also, the story does have a few sinister moments scattered throughout. So moving on to characters now, I'm doing something a little bit different to my normal reviews. I'm just going to cover the 8th Doctor and Bliss within this, because I'm just going to be repeating the same phrases and stuff. So yeah, there's going to be select characters, so if there's a new character introduced within that story, I'll talk about them in detail within that story, and if I think of anything, you know, other praises within other stories, I'll mention that within the actual review. So if we go on to the 8th Doctor, played by Paul McGann, well, it's Paul McGann, what can you expect? It's a cracking performance, and he definitely delivers an excellent performance. You know, he's very concerned for Bliss, you know, he's very optimistic, you know, about the planet, and the last 10 minutes Paul McGann really does shine, and just Paul McGann's an absolute highlight within this box set. So yeah, the 8th Doctor is brilliant within this series. Bliss, played by Raki Thakura. The last box set, Bliss didn't really get a chance to shine, as the last box set's main focus was on the 8th Doctor, and the only real time Bliss got to shine was in Echoes of War. So with this story being about her going back to her home world, you'd think that this would be a perfect opportunity for her to shine. And she sort of does get some moments to shine, as she's separated from the Doctor, so we see her being quite independent and taking charge of situations. And Raki Thakura gives a good performance, but I feel like her performance at the ending felt rather canned, like she was holding it back. You know, especially what happened to a character within the ending of the story. You'd think she'd have this fierce attack, you know, delivering the lines, but it felt like she was holding back, like she felt a bit afraid to let go, which was a bit of a shame. And I think that really let down that moment within the series, because you think that this is going to be one of the powerful moments for Bliss and the 8th Doctor's dynamic, especially what happened to Bliss within this story. It just came a bit of a bad performance in that section. So otherwise she gives a good performance, but she just kind of lets down one of the crucial moments for this story. So what are my overall thoughts on the Lords of Terra? Well, overall, Lords of Terra comes across as a bit of a disappointment, considering this is by Jonathan Morris, who is an excellent writer. He's one of Big Finish's best. So I kind of expected more from him. And yes, the story does have its moments, like the first 20 minutes being very solid, but after that the story just crumbles, and it just comes across rather dull. Despite the various twists, with the majority of the twists being very predictable, it just comes down to the fact that this story sounds like you've heard it 100 times before, with this story very much reminding me of the second story from Only the Monstrous. So yeah, the Time War Volume 2 isn't off for a flying start. It started off so well, but it started to crumble within the first sort of 20 minutes, which is a real shame. So overall, I'm going to give the Lords of Terra a 7 out of 10. So will Guy Adams improve the Time War series? Answer yes, this is a truly brilliant story by Guy Adams. It's fun, it's clever, it's full of energy, and definitely the highlight of the set from me. Because it's one of those experimental stories, and the risk pays off, making it a real fresh and exciting listen. This is the type of story I want from the Time War, because it's not your standard Time War story, because most of the Time War stories, what Big Finish have done, you could put any old Doctor in there and it would just be your standard Dalek invasion. So these are the type of stories I want from the Time War, these being these types of wacky experimental stories. You know, the start of the story lures you in with the Doctor's TARDIS with a mysterious figure stepping out, which turns out to be the Ogron Doctor. Huzzah! And that brings in a nice bit of comedy, but raises some questions. You know, what has happened to the Doctor? And this story does have a strong theme of time throughout. So after that, we have a nice moment with the Doctor and Bliss feeding some ducks, and the Doctor with us learning about the Doctor's passion for antique shops. So this is very much the calm before the storm, as we're introduced to the 12. Obviously, if you're familiar with Doom Coalition, you'll know the 11. This is kind of the next regeneration on, I'm guessing, because it's called the 12. That's my logic anyway. Then we have this rather lovely scene between the Doctor, Bliss, and the 12 and the Ogron Doctor in a tea shop, which is, to me, is one of the highlights of the set. To be honest, it was just a great scene before we go darting off to the Ogron homeworld, where we expand more on the Ogron's culture, which is pretty funny the way the Ogron Doctor sums that up. And the story isn't all smiles and giggles, as we do have some dark and gruesome moments within it in the form of the Dalek experiments, which are done by the Dalek Overseer, with him genetically modifying TARDISes, experimenting on Ogrons, to name a few. So we do have some sinister, disturbing scenes. The Doctor and the 12 dealing with the Dalek Overseer, where we see Bliss and the Ogron Doctor trying to rally a revolt, and that's basically the story. So moving on to characters now with the Ogron Doctor played by John Coleshaw. Would you like a Satsuma? Ah, brilliant. Yeah, he is just an absolute delight. Definitely the highlight of the box set for me, with very subtle classic references what are cleverly weaved into the dialogue, with his dialogue being from previous Doctors, from Power of the Daleks to Castrovalva, with a nice parody of the 8th Doctor's first moments. He just gets some really lovely moments, and one of my favourite moments from the Ogron Doctor is when he's trying to rally the Ogrons. It is just absolutely brilliant. The chemistry between him and Bliss is wonderful. The Ogron Doctor I really want to see more of. He's just absolutely brilliant. Great comic relief within this story. Absolutely brilliantly done by John Coleshaw. The Dalek Overseer, obviously played by Nick Briggs. It's quite refreshing to hear Nick Briggs do a slightly different Dalek voice, which is pretty sinister, and I think that the Dalek Overseer is a great addition to the story, of him being this Dalek abomination, with him being everything the Daleks despise in the form of being very impure and being this rather radical scientist. And Nick Briggs does a wonderful job, and the Dalek Overseer is just such a fantastic design. The only real shame is he doesn't feature that often. I would have liked to see more of the Dalek Overseer. That's one thing I would have liked to have seen more of the Dalek Overseer. 12, played by Julie Mackenzie. Basically an evil version of your nan. That's the best way to describe her. You know, it does explain how she keeps her previous selves in check, and the character's quite hard to control. You know, she thinks she's above everybody else. You know, she's this sort of sweet little old lady who carefully masks her malevolence. I think that's the best way to describe the 12. Really nice addition to this series, actually. Will say this, I did enjoy the involvement of the 12 within this, because I was quite unsure, thinking, why are they putting the 12 within this box set? But yeah, I think that overall she was a great addition to this series. So what are my concluding thoughts on Planet of the Ogrons? This is an excellent story. As soon as I hit play, the story just doesn't switch off. It's full of energy, great jokes, clever dialogue, and it just doesn't feel dull. If you enjoyed Sword of a Chevalier by Guy Adams, then you're bound to love this story. From the darker moments with the Dalek Overseer to the lighter moments with the Ogron Doctor, this story has a perfect balance, and I'm absolutely... it's just a delight to listen to, and it's one of those stories which I'm going to be revisiting a fair few times. And please, Big Finish, can we have more Ogron Doctor? He was just an absolute delight. Please, can we have a spin-off of the Ogron Doctor? Because, my God, he was definitely a really welcome addition. And the Dalek Overseer, like I said, this is one of my nitpicks as well. I would have liked to have seen a bit more from the Dalek Overseer, but the moments he did have were brilliant. So I'm going to give Planet of the Ogrons a 10 out of 10. A wonderful release, and definitely has put the Time War series back on track. In the Garden of the Deaf, it's one of those stories I don't really want to say too much, as it's one of those stories you're best going in blind. But I will say that this story does benefit on a re-listen, because I did enjoy it more when I re-listened to it. With this story being very much a continuation from Planet of the Ogrons, with 3 characters being in prison on this hostile jungle planet, which does remind me of Echoes of War, with deadly creatures, no trees, with deadly thorns. So the characters have memory loss. What a surprise! The 8th Doctor's lost his memory again. Surely his brain must be like Swiss cheese by now. So we have a really great speech with him wondering what type of person he is. You know, why is it in this secluded cell within a cell? But they only gain their memories while they're being interrogated. So we have Bliss trying to fit it all together. And I will have to say that this is Bliss's best story so far. She really develops as a character. Also, the 12 really gets utilised well within this story. And this is probably the 12's best story. Because if you've experienced Doom Coalition, you know what the 11's like. Because this is very much the 12 being her classic self, really. You know, as we near closer to the end of the story, with her being this very sinister and just an absolute maniac, and also we get her trying to uncover the mystery and trying to escape. And another thing what I enjoy about this story is how technology blends into the world, with the Daleks being how Daleks should be, with them working in the shadows, being sly and devious. So we do get a mention of the time strategist, and with the final 12 minutes probably being the most gripping the story ever gets. But this story mostly does come across as a slow burner. But the end for the story does set up the next instalment for the series rather well. So what are my overall thoughts of In the Garden of Death? Well, it's an enjoyable story, what benefits on re-listen, but it does suffer from pacing issues. But once the story kicks in, it does move quite nicely, with us focusing on the main 3 stars rather well, and it just does quite a nice job to develop characters, and it's quite interesting as a story. But at times the story does come across rather basic, so I'm going to give this story a 7 out of 10. A nice bit of a character-driven story and some interesting ideas scattered throughout, but the main problem I have with this story is pacing. On to the series finale, Jonah. But before you ask, this has nothing to do with the tortured episode Adrift. So what do I think of Jonah? Well, I think that this is a fantastic addition to this set, with the Doctor being forced into a position of authority by Alistra, with this being the main story she features in, as we see the Doctor in command of a submarine. So this really is quite an interesting role to see the 8th Doctor in that position, making life or death decisions, with this story really foreshadowing the night of the Doctor. So I like how this story puts the Doctor in that awkward place, with the theme of the story being how far will people go. Another thing what I really enjoyed about this story is the world, with the sea water rendering weapons ineffective, and time travel just doesn't work, so the TARDISes can't materialise within this water. Which also leads to some great moments of the Daleks, of them sacrificing themselves since the weapons don't work, so that leads them to sacrifice themselves. The story does have a great mystery, and it kind of reminds me of The Outliers, that second Doctor early adventure, with sort of some great questions within it, with, you know, what information is the 12 hiding, what is the Oroshima, and what are the Daleks excavating. So the story really does link in well with In the Garden of Death, with the 12. We also do have the Mind Probe back, from that famous moment from the 5 Doctors, you know, no, not the Mind Probe. So that's glad to have that back. And also we do have the aftermath from Lords of Terra for Bliss, so that's quite good to see that plot point. So what are my concluding thoughts on Jonah? Well, Jonah is claustrophobic and the stakes are rising every minute. Making this a tense, thrilling adventure, putting the Doctor in these dilemmas, is a great way to hint at his downfall on Khan. The story just doesn't stop for air, it rattles along really well. It's a truly great way to close this box set, with interesting ideas and themes, making this a real highlight of the set, with danger being around every corner, with some great supporting characters. This is a truly brilliant way to close off this box set, and I've got to say, you can tell Paul McGann is loving being in charge of his submarine. It's just a really brilliant story. I love the claustrophobic atmosphere created within it, and it's just so tense and thrilling, and is utterly brilliant. I just love the mystery behind it as well. It's very classic Doctor Who, but it's brilliant with a Time War spin on it. I just love the ideas within it and the themes. It's a truly marvellous story, and it's a great way to close off this set. So I'm going to give Jonah a 9 out of 10, a wonderful addition to this box set. So what are my overall thoughts on the 8th Doctor Time War Volume 2? Well, I think that it's a very good box set with some great additions in the form of Planet of the Ogrons, Jonah. Personally, I do prefer this box set to Volume 1, as I feel like Volume 2 is a little bit more interesting. I feel like the stories have a little bit more to offer, but still the Time War series feels like it's missing a few pieces. This should be the writers' playground to try and experiment and take risks, and that's why I love Planet of the Ogrons, because it does something new and exciting. You know, put the time in the Time War, explore different dimensions. That's why I love Infernal Devices. Show us how horrible the Daleks and the Time Lords are. You know, by doing that, it shows why the Doctors doesn't want to be a part of that war. And this is what I quite like about Jonah, that it subtly mentions that, and I quite like that. Shows the true horrors of the Time War, because right now they just seem like your standard Dalek stories, what you'd get in the monthly range or any other series you'd get. I just want a little bit more creativity from this range. You know, the Dalek Overseer was a really great addition, and that's the kind of thing I want to see. Maybe I expect a bit too much from these box sets, but right now some of the stories do come across a little bit basic, but I do think that this box set is a step in the right direction. So my overall rating for this box set is an 8 out of 10. It's made me really enjoy the 8th Doctor Time War stuff, because I'm going to be honest, the Time War stuff for me is very hit or miss. You know, my favourite Time War release so far is the War Master, but I feel like this box set is a step in the right direction. I feel like the stories are a little bit more interesting, but I still feel like the box set and the Time War series in general lacks creativity. This should be where the writers really get to fully challenge themselves, you know, be really creative, get some wacky ideas, and I think with this box set starting to tap with that idea, you know, starting to tap into that idea. So I can't wait to see where this series goes, because this is a step in the right direction. You know, and hopefully that this is a step in the right direction. Hopefully the series continues on this path, because despite, you know, Lords of Terror being the weak link within this series, the other 3 stories are a lot more interesting. I found that Lords of Terror is definitely the weak link within this box set, but the other 3 are truly, you know, worth listening to, because they try and do something a little bit different, and that's what I appreciate, that it is doing something what we haven't really seen before. So hopefully they continue on this creative path, because I can't wait to see what we do, and hopefully we get some more experimental stories and more Ogron Doctor. Yes, more Ogron Doctor. But yes, overall I'm going to give the 8th Doctor Time War Volume 2 a lovely 8 out of 10. So thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I'll see you in my next video, which will be Hour of the Cybermen. Yes, the return of the 80s Cybermen in the main range, what haven't been seen for a long time, and they're being played by David Banks and Mark Hardy, so that'll be out in the next couple of days. As soon as the CD arrives, I'll film that review, and that'll be out in your subscription boxes very soon. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. So thank you very much, and bye bye.